Hello and welcome to Dancing with Water. Conversations on the embodiment of the feminine.
where we explore surrendering to natural rhythms, listening within, moving in harmony with others, and what's revealed in the darkness.
We're your hosts, Theresa Widmann, sound practitioner, lifestyle architect, and mother.
And I'm Jennifer Mulak, an herbalist, earth steward, an energy practitioner, and founder of Cosmic Mother. Thank you so much for being here.
We started these conversations back in April of 2025. As a part of my former radio show and podcast, I Want What She Has, Jennifer would join me once a month for what we were calling the feminine frequency. And I wrapped up my last radio show at the end of February of this year, 2026. But we've really enjoyed having these conversations where we explore the feminine principle, feminine energy, sometimes dipping into feminine embodiment as women, but largely focused on the feminine as an archetype. And we wanted to continue. And this is our very first YouTube video. So thank you for your patience with us. We're recording this in my house with the beautiful backdrop image by the late artist Michael Crawford. I've been holding space for this photograph for my dear friend Carolita Johnson. And until we have a more formal studio space available for us, we're going to be here cozying up on my couch and interviewing guests both locally here in the Hudson Valley and beyond. And we're going to be dropping our first official interview with Laurice Simone Saloum, and that will be launching on April 1st. But we wanted to jump in here with a little introduction to what we're going to be doing. And maybe I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer, to talk about the name.
Yeah. So we wanted the podcast to be called The Feminine Frequency. We thought it was such a great name, and it is a great name. So great that someone already has it. So we didn't think of that before we kind of went down that road. But we're actually grateful that someone else has it because it gave us an opportunity to kind of sit down, go back to the drawing board, use our own creativity and brainstorming, and come up with this new name, which has a different feel than feminine frequency, which I really appreciate. It feels softer, it feels more poetic, and it feels a little bit more aligned even with what we're up to. So, dancing with water, just like because part of it, we haven't really talked about this, but I feel like it's kind of impossible almost to dance with water, even though you can be in the water and dancing with water. It feels like this somewhat elusive activity, but it really, to me, is bringing in this idea of movement, of fluidity, of flow, which are a lot of the principles of feminine energy. And I was thinking about it this morning, how water in a river or in a stream, it's kind of just flowing and doing its thing, sometimes softly, sometimes a little more forcefully, depending on what is behind it, like how much water is behind it. But it also, something that's like so soft also has the ability to change stone, right? Which is such like a force. And so it kind of can smooth it out. And I don't know, it's just like this really magical, to me, magical element that we're talking about when we're thinking about water. and how it is in so many different forms. It's in the ocean, it comes out of our taps, it's in our bodies, the moon influences it. Like, it's just like when we agreed to name it this, I didn't even think about all of this, like, that's behind it. And so I just feel really excited about the Dancing with Water name. And I'll just say one last thing for now about water is that um there's this idea that up in the Himalayas, I think, are known as not the lungs of the earth, but there's something about the water in the Himalayan mountains, and there's water that's been up there forever and ever. And as the climate is shifting and things are getting warmer, more water is coming down from other places. And that water is ancient, right? And has all of this information. I don't know, this is a little bit out there, but there, like, it has this information that's been in that land, right? And that where the water is part of it. And so there's this idea that as this water is coming down, it's coming into all of our streams and across the whole world with these like energies of the ancient indigenous peoples and their beliefs about working with water and respecting water as a sentient being. And so it just feels like a very potent time for water.
It's funny because I haven't thought about I liked the name, I think, initially because it was an unfamiliar phrase, right? It's not, I don't know how it has been used. And so it makes the brain kind of come out of its logical processing, with language being such like a masculine framework for discussing and moving through the world. Kind of twisting language in a way that is out of normal structure.
Mm-hmm.
To me, what was attractive about this name, and also obviously with water being oftentimes one of a feminine archetype, right? It has that feminine energy. Um, a lot of people will say that the water in our body is the where we hold our emotions. But I had never actually thought about it in terms of my own relationship to water and how I live on this property that is bordered by a small stream and is very low into the water table. And every spring, we get flooded in our yard and in our basement. And, um, and it's been something that I've had to work on my relationship with water, as I have with the mugwort that surrounds the property. And so that I'm transitioning that relationship from one of fear and maybe even frustration or anger at the water to one of gratitude. And even though it can be disruptive to our lives, it really is such a beautiful, poetic element that is vital to life. And like you said, all of the symbolism in water and the way that it moves, it just is ripe for different conversations. Not to say that our show is going to be about water. Not to confuse anyone. Water is an embodiment of the feminine. And one of the things I think Jennifer and I have struggled with in the approximate year that we've been having these conversations is how do we take the word or phrase, the feminine, out of gender? Because really I think our motivation for having these conversations is to inspire inquiry about how we embody feminine energy, whether we are male, female, non-binary, anywhere on the gender spectrum. And how does the feminine energy show up in our world? And I will say for myself, the reason that it feels important to have those conversations is because to me, I see the world being heavily embodied in masculine energy. The masculine being the structures that keep things together, which are important. And a lot of our conversations will involve and invite conversation about the masculine and how it is a vital companion to the feminine. And but to think about how the feminine has either been undervalued or invisible, and and how it could potentially shift things for us if we learn to see the feminine and appreciate the feminine differently than perhaps we have been.
Yeah, I think it's about bringing more balance, right? And so, as the world seems very weighted towards the masculine energy of force and structure and those types of energies, right? It's a little bit out of balance or a lot of out of balance, right? If you, depending on who you're talking to. And so, the idea that we can bring more awareness and more attention and more curiosity about how we can bring more balance into this world, I think, is through some of these conversations that we're having with different people in our community and beyond, and how we see them and how they practice embodiment of the feminine and how we kind of show up with it in our lives too as we share our experiences. I think it's a way to help bring more of that balance to a world that's very out of balance right now. And it seems like a ripe time to be doing this, as you know, we seem to be going through some kind of shift and some kind of opportunity to create more of what we want in the world.
And I'll mention that when we were doing this show as part of my radio show, and I Want What She Has, Jennifer and I spent some time um, sharing our stories and our relationship to the masculine and our own personal journeys of recovering our relationship to the feminine. And I'm sure those stories will weave their way into conversations that we'll have on this show. But we'll link to them in the show notes here if you're curious to hear about them. And it may inspire you to look at your own journeys. Our dear friend and collaborator in sound for this show, Kelly Scar, I believe was the first person to recommend the heroine's journey to us, which is largely a woman's journey in modern time of feeling the pressure to assimilate to the masculine in order to be successful, and then realizing how that has been a disservice to oneself, and then a reclaiming and a reconnecting of the feminine, and then a re-merging and rebalancing of the masculine and the feminine. So we talk about that in previous episodes. But to me, it was a very powerful recognition of my life story because it really did fit. Jennifer and I both came from corporate backgrounds, very masculine, kind of high pressure jobs. And now we both live up in the Hudson Valley and do different things.
Very different things. Very different. And so this show, like Theresa was saying, it's new, but it is a continuation of some of the work that was being done on the I Want What She Has podcast, which was a weekly show. And one of the things that we're experimenting with, at least in the beginning of this new show and podcast, is that it will be released on the new moon and the full moon each month. And so it will help you be in more connection with the moon cycle. We just thought that that was a nice way to have a little more space between the conversations and also honor that feminine principle of the moon. And then the other change, like you already said, is that will now be on YouTube, which I also feel is kind of an experiment. I feel like it's all an experiment to see how this all goes.
Yeah, we're in sort of the mucky, unstructured, unshapen form of the feminine as we do this, and that that's where magic, I think, can really come from. But there's also, hiccups along the way. I to just, I guess, add to what you said about the moon cycles. I think that was one of the first ways that I really started connecting with the feminine energy, which to me is a more natural form of cycles. We live in the Northeast, we have seasons here. Everyone has moon cycles, however. And stepping out of the sort of forced structure of a Gregorian calendar and the 7 day a week, Monday through Friday work days, um, it's hard for people to step out of that. Even if you do step out of it from a work perspective or a responsibility perspective, it can still get hard. It'd be hard to get out of that. But I guess my point is that you don't have to. You can still be operating within that structure and framework, but sort of layer this on top of it in order to balance the feminine with the masculine, so that being aware of the moon cycles. Obviously, the moon cycles have and historically have had impacts on women's bodies, but they impact all of us. They impact the natural world. Animals are behaving differently when the moon has different levels of light that it's reflecting to us, and so that, along with the seasons, is a big thing that it, to me, is a grounding experience to step out of that external structure that's been put together by people centuries ago, and coming back to this natural rhythm and understanding what the harmony looks like for us in working with that natural rhythm and bringing it to us. With especially like the seasonal shifts, and the moon shifts also, right? The full moon's higher energy. What does that mean for us? What can we do to be aware of how we respond to those cycles? How are we embodying winter we're just coming out of? How are we embodying spring that we're moving into? What does that look like for us? And yeah, so that was I think a big reason that we chose to do our best to release shows on the new moon and the full moon.
That's interesting. You're making me remember that when I was working in my corporate job, which I think is based on the sun cycle, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
also like, every day is the same. The
Right.
sun comes up, and right. And so and the sun is a more masculine embodiment, right? With its strength and radiation and like fire. And so, one of the things that was recommended to me when I was trying to figure out what to do and to get out of my corporate environment was just do more of the things that you love and follow those little threads of the things that bring you joy. And I started following the moon cycle too, and then hosting new moon gatherings for my friends and I, and also bringing in like crystals and moon stuff on my desk at my cubicle at work. And so I love to be reminded of that the moon was also something that really helped me connect more with my feminine, which ultimately led to more intuition and led to me being here
Yeah,
doing something totally different
I
now.
love
So,
that.
yeah.
Well, and I have gotten out of touch. I have become out of touch with the moon cycles. I would say probably since I had my child 3.5 years ago. I am having a hard time really stepping into any own rhythm of my own. And so I have been out of touch with the moon cycles. I know when they're happening, but it's often just the day of, and I'm like, okay, let me read the astrology. And that's about all I do these days for the moon cycle. And so this is also important for me to try to reconnect with that cycle that felt very grounding and therapeutic to my life and my relationship to my own creativity and my own energy cycles. And so this is a little bit of a support system for myself to be doing that, because I have been out of alignment for a little while.
And to that end, we are releasing this intro on the new moon on March 18th, new moon in Pisces. And I'll just like be totally honest, we were trying to release our first interview today and really launch the podcast in full force. And then just like a couple of days ago, we were sitting with Kelly trying to work on the music. And then I was like, wait, we could just do it on the full moon instead of, because we haven't done a lot of promotion of this and that kind of thing. And so, just for an example of the feminine in practice, we were like, wait, why don't we release some of this pressure and wait until the next moon to release our interview? So, but we still wanted to do something to honor the new moon on March 18th, which is a new moon in Pisces, which is also, we have the equinox coming up on Friday, the 20th. And so there's a lot of energy around newness, it feels like, and spring. We've been sitting under a blanket of snow here in the Hudson Valley. I feel like it's been like since Thanksgiving. I don't know if it's truly been that long, but that's what it
It's been
feels
a
like.
long,
Yeah.
cold, lonely winter.
Yeah. And it's so strange to now look out the window and see the earth again that's beneath all the snow. It's like no longer this like white landscape. So and the daffodils are pushing through and the crocuses, like there's a very um fertile feeling of newness and what's been kind of happening even beneath the snow. Like when the snow melted, I was like, you guys have been here under the snow all along, this ground ivy, like I was just like, oh my gosh, what a miracle. So we have the spring equinox energy that I'm actually feeling very strongly because it was such a long, cold, snowy winter. And I didn't travel for one of the first winters in a while. So I was really embracing it and in the full kind of resting and dreaming. And it does feel so aligned that just in the past couple of weeks, like all of this like creative inspiration and creative spark is coming to me, and I just feel like all of these little sprouts and seedlings coming up to like put their heads in the light and be like, what about me? Let's work on this, let's work on this, let's work on this. And so I feel very aligned with the spring energy of the newness and a new beginning, which is also more the energy of a new moon versus a full moon. It's like a time for setting intentions. And I think that with this new moon in Pisces, there's also a call for clearing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I have historically read Tanaz's astrology on foreverconscious.com, and I was just peeking at it before we started this, and I'll just share a little snippet. She says, with 7 celestial bodies and water signs, there is strong watery
water.
strong watery influence surrounding this new moon, which can heighten our sensitivity to energy. This makes it a powerful time for intuitive practices, creativity, and dream work. Messages can arrive through symbols, emotions, or sudden insights, especially when we give ourselves space to listen. And I think that that's the opportunity to thank the masculine, because the masculine energy is the boundary. And it says, okay, yes, feminine energy, you want to birth all these little things and all this creativity is bubbling up from you, but let's pause and let's figure out where we want to direct our energy. And the masculine actually protects us from burnout and helps us to pause, to really kind of hit like green light, yellow light, red light. I don't know why I just put that in there. I have a 3-year-old. But to think about that and how we're showing gratitude for the masculine in this spring awakening, and where we need to structure ourselves and our energy, and how we're using it.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important because all of these different ideas can become chaotic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of like the shadow side of the feminine is chaos and ungroundedness in a way, right? Like just kind of like floating around and nothing taking action and no execution. And so I have been feeling that like, wow, I have all of these ideas. I can't possibly do all of them. And what historically has happened, I would become overwhelmed and not do any of them. Right. And so I love this Pisces energy that's asking us to say, like, okay, just be quiet for a little while and listen,
Yeah.
and then tap into that intuition to see which of the projects and endeavors are the way forward instead of trying to do all of them and then accomplishing nothing.
Yes. It makes me think of, we did our first interview with Larice, as we mentioned, which will be released on April 1st. And there was a funny moment in our conversation where she reflected on, those organizations that are, working to democratize authority and responsibilities, but how if it's not really done well, nothing can get done very efficiently because there's just so much spread around, and that we really do need to work in balance with the masculine and the feminine in that way. And I want to just put it out there that we have thought long and hard about whether or not there is a different word to use when it comes to talking about these things. And when I say these things, we've sort of alluded to them back and throughout this conversation. But it's those unseen happenings, right? Intuition, dream work, things that happen in the darkness, that creativity. Those are the feminine principles that we're talking about. And so we have tried to think of it, is there a different word to use? We've asked some very smart people who've been talking about this for a while, and nobody has really landed on a better word. You could analogize it to the yin concept in Eastern philosophy and Taoism, yang being masculine, yin being the feminine. That didn't seem to fit us because that's not our practice necessarily. But we're open to conversation around terminology, and hope that you can understand that what we're getting at are those things that we are referring to as feminine embodiment, and sort of get away from the language of it. So, this is just a little introduction to an informal introduction to what we're hoping to do on this show. We do have an Instagram account, which we'd love for you to follow us there if you're using that system. We'd love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we do have a Patreon set up. It feels like it feels like a gift to be doing this work as somebody who's been really doing and having these conversations for many years. My radio show ran for 8 years. So it does feel very much like a gift, but it does take a lot of energy. And so we are obviously very grateful for any support that anyone feels capable of giving. And while we haven't, this is a new thing for us. We don't have anyone right now who is doing advertising or sponsorship with us, but we're very much open to those conversations. And so if that feels like something that you'd be interested in exploring, you can reach out to us.
And we'll leave all the links to the Instagram and our email and to the previous show that I Want What She Has. We'll drop all of that into the show notes so you can have easy access to that.
Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll be back.
See you next time.